clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
But really, it was the. Have you had so many conversations with people? They're like, "Oh my God, what was it like? What was it like to be there in DC?" Like, I feel like I've given the same conversation to like the same people like over and over and over again.
Yes, and what I learned yesterday, I was at a big event last night, and several people asked because I made a small post on my social media. They were saying that the liberal media wasn't like advertising and airing kind of the reality of what was going on in DC. And so uh,
Yeah.
my friend Chris, he was like, I was watching through all of our friends that were there, kind of the excitement and the buzz that was going on. And when you would turn on like whatever, liberal channel, there was
Yeah.
no coverage. It was like nobody came. He had to move the inauguration indoors because nobody would be there and they needed to show that it was like packed. I was just like, that wasn't my experience of the videos that I have of the 200,000 people wandering in a line 9 blocks wide was kind of telling.
Dude, that was nuts. Like when we walked around on Sunday for the rally, and
Oh my
we
God.
never even got to the end of the line. Like we
Yeah.
literally turned around and just said, "There's like zero way we're ever getting in. It's pointless." I was talking to Rep V Brees Iverson, happens to be my wife, but who was with us, and she said that some of the other representatives that were there, like one of them was in line. I want to say, who did she say? I think she said Sharf was in line Sunday. Rep Sharf was in line for 5 hours.
Oh my. Good
Like,
for
there's
her.
no way. And it was like 10 degrees. There's no way I'm standing in that line for
Yeah.
5 hours. To as much as I appreciate President Trump, I wasn't going to stand in that line for.
I knew where the beginning of the line was. I didn't know where the end of it was.
Yeah, we
And I wasn't
came
going
in
to go look
anyway
for
at the
the end.
beginning too. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I saw some people that had some VIP passes, and then I go, well, "How are you getting in?" And they were like, "Yeah, we had VIP passes, but they weren't the right VIP passes."
Right.
So
Right.
everything got changed.
Yeah. It was a great experience though.
I
I
thought
would do
this.
it again.
Oh yeah, in a heartbeat. I think that it was the vibe was what I loved most about it. There was just something. Usually, when you go to DC, and I've been there a few times, I'm sure you've been there, you know,
Hmm.
lobbying for the counties and things like that. But it's always at this business vibe. Everybody's here. This one was like
Right.
it's like wow, we're seeing something change, and that's what I felt.
Me too. It did feel, I don't think I've ever been in an environment with that many people outside of, like a major sporting event, but the vibe felt the same to me. Like the vibes, like if you're going to go to a Blazers game and they're doing well in the playoffs
Oh.
or something, and people are excited and they're collaborating and there's a little bit of, competition, but I really appreciated it.
It was like at that bar we were at, remember on
The
Monday,
tap
and
house. Yeah.
yeah, the tap house. And what was great is like I felt like I was talking to my dad about it today, and he was like, "Well," I go, "Well, it was crazy. It was like watching the Super Bowl at a bar with like
Yes.
everybody that's the same fans, right? There was no other fans there, and it was all
Right.
of us. And every time, something was said that was like a touchdown, right? The whole bar would erupt, and I said the energy was just awesome, and I thought
It
that was
was.
just
Yeah.
fun as all get out. What did you do any fun events? What events did you hit while you're there?
I went Friday night to the I Love America event that I think I saw you and Vicky at.
Yeah.
And is it Master Kim or Dr. Kim or Chair Kim? I'm not sure. She's got lots of leadership titles, which is
Yes.
amazing. That was a pretty unique space for me to be in. Uh, and, it's always nice to see friendly faces from your home state. And of course, there's a lot of Oregonians in
Yeah.
that environment. And that was
Did,
kind of a great kickoff to the weekend.
did you go to that cigar bar afterwards? Did you end up there? It was not too far away, and I haven't been in a cigar bar where they let you smoke cigars
Yeah.
indoors. And I don't smoke cigars, but I think I had about 17 that night. I think 'cause I mean I didn't actually smoke, but I mean just the smoke that was in that
Oh,
room
sure.
just insane. And we ran into like the Mississippi. It was kind of fun. We like met a bunch of like the Mississippi GOP chair was there. I saw like our
Oh,
national committeeman, Dan Mason was there. I saw him and a
yeah.
bunch of like I said, it was fun to see all the Oregonians and stuff. And I think we were at a Bentz thing on Saturday night, a little fundraiser with Congressman Bentz, and he said, he goes, I don't think I've seen this many Oregonians in Washington, D.C. since he's been there. So it was cool to see a bunch of us show up. I think that was great.
I think half of my flight on the way out was Oregon, like people going to the inauguration of some kind. And there were people that I knew, from senators, other commissioners from across the state, which was pretty interesting. And then just a lot of like local friends from the party that do, different activities. Mike Slagle, who's the chair of the Marion County GOP, was on my flight. And he had some pretty great tickets. Yeah, he got to go to the Liberty Ball. I was a little jealous.
We were able to go there too. Yeah, Vicky and I
I'm
went to
sure
that
you
one.
were.
We had we had a crazy story of getting into the Liberty Ball. So we were with our good friend Jenny, who's the realtor CEO in Oregon,
Yeah.
and she was hanging with us. And then we were in the hotel. I was waiting for my tickets to show up. So the guy was stuck in an Uber, right? And he was bringing me the tickets.
Oh,
So we're in the hotel next to the convention center, and there's an underground tunnel that goes into the Liberty Ball. And so we saw some people lining up. We're like, oh, I think our tickets will work here. So we get in that line because we didn't want to go outside, because we had some other people standing outside, and they said they're standing out there for hours
yeah.
at this point, just waiting to get in. So we go through this underground tunnel. And we met up with this couple who he was a mayor from Kentucky, small town mayor, which is kind of cool. And his wife, we just met him in line.
Yeah.
Yes, and talking about life. And so we're sitting there BSing. And then so we go down we finally get down the first set of stairs. You had to go down 2 sets of stairs. And we had this. So Governor Youngkins came by with like 20 people. So he comes by, and and they had a staffer like leading it, saying, make a hole, Governor Youngkins, whatever group coming by. So the one lady from Kentucky, she's like, let's just draft with them. So we literally just like became part of Governor Youngkins' crew. We got almost to the detectors, they're on the
Secret
base.
Service.
Yeah, so the Secret Service was there, and everything went. So it's probably like 10 people wide in this hallway, and it was just jam packed. And they kept bringing these people along the wall that was like Gold Star families coming through, this sort of thing. And they're like, make a hole. And then like Secret Service was coming through. And then there was a congressman that came. So we got to right up to where the metal detectors were. And there was a guy with a congressman. I don't even know who the congressman was. I have no idea. Him and like 3 or 4 other staffers were with them. You could tell they're staffers. They were young. They was like congressman coming through, and Vicky's right there. And so the 3 of us, we literally just like, fuck it, jumped in right behind him with the Secret Service and didn't have to go through the metal detectors. He went to the right of it and literally made it. I was the last guy through, and they shut that entrance down. And they made everybody else. And so we got wanded real quick by Secret Service, made it into the Liberty Ball. And everybody else, and we're talking probably 500 people, had to go back outside and wait at the end of the line to get in.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was
no bueno.
Pretty nuts, but interesting time to say the least, I think. Oh, hey, by the way, I'm here with Danielle Bethell.
Hi.
Yeah, right. We should probably introduce who you are. I think people would see it before they click on it, so I'll put it in the title and make sure. So, yeah, obviously commissioner from Marion County, which is kind of great to have you on the podcast. My guest host today, because Reagan went and decided to have a baby last night. So
it's so exciting. I'm super excited for them.
Yeah. So we're recording this on Thursday, and I'll try to get it out right away for people. Probably get it out on Friday, January 24th, 4th. So I have to do the producing because, so it might.
Because you're a one-man show today.
I am. I know. I don't have Reagan. He does all the technical work. So
Oh,
you get to be
don't,
my.
you don't have to give away all your secrets. It's okay.
No, I always tell everybody that Reagan does the work. I just add the color commentary. But today I'll do the heavy lifting and you can add the color commentary. So
Perfect.
we'll get into
I'm
some
game.
details. But I wish Reagan well. Baby Owen was born yesterday. He didn't give me the exact time, but it must have been somewhere around 8 o'clock last night. So
Okay.
but baby and wife are doing great. It's his third child. So I
Yeah,
think
they're
back,
pros.
yeah, I think back to having how many you got kids? How many kids do you have?
I have three.
You have three, so it's his third. So
Yeah. Mine are
ugh,
much older though. I'm
Vicky
a
and I
little
were
ways down the road from
yeah,
him.
ours too, right? How old are your kids?
23, 19, and 16.
23. Wow.
And then I have two granddaughters. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter and a
What?
6-month-old granddaughter.
You look like
I'm a
you're like
Grammy.
25. That's crazy.
I thank you. I will forever be 25.
Yeah, I was a little jealous because I love babies, right? They're just awesome
Hmm.
to be around. But then I was kind of thinking, God, those sleepless nights, maybe it's not
They're
too
a lot
bad.
of work.
Yeah, being a
They're a lot of work.
grandparent's probably better, right?
I mean, yes, I think the difference that I've heard from everybody, and it's true for me, is that when you're a mom or a dad, when you're a parent, you're like in it. Your every need must be met and all the things, and you're exhausted. But as a Grammy, my husband's a papa and I'm a Grammy. When the girls come over, they're just, we don't have to program them. We can just love them and spoil them.
Yeah.
And that is something. The other day I noticed, well, I was giving the girls a bath and my great Grace Lynn is my 2-year-old granddaughter. And she formed a whole sentence for the first time.
That-
She had just poured a cup of water over her sister Paisley's head, who was screaming her head off. And Gracelyn looked at me and she said, "What's the matter with her?"
ah,
I was like, she
that's
just made a sentence.
I don't remember my kids started like making sentences. I wish I remember
Neither.
stuff for some reason I don't remember that stuff.
No, because I know what it looks like watching my son and daughter-in-law raise these girls. Like Catherine, my daughter-in-law, she's not going to remember that because she's trying to figure out how fast to get them out of the bath, where their pajamas are, where the bottles are, how fast can they put them in bed because they need to go to bed themselves. They're just like, everything is just, um, I don't know, practical. You're just moving through
Yeah.
the motions.
Yeah.
I'm so far removed from the motions of making their lives go that I can just be a part of it.
You get
Like
to
just,
just
it's
watch.
awesome.
Yeah. I
Yes.
do
Yep.
remember though, both of my kids and both my boys are 18 and 17. So one's in college, one's a junior in high school, but they're both their first words, both of them were no.
Oh,
I think they heard no so much from their mom that that became their first word.
well,
I think
hopefully they learn the definition of it so they can apply it when they're told no now.
well, they're 18 and 17. I don't think that's not exactly I don't think they really
I
learn
know. Yeah,
yeah,
that's fair.
much.
That's
Well, so
awesome.
tell me a little bit about, I mean, obviously the commissioner of Marion County, been there 3 years, yes?
I'm actually starting my fifth
Starting
year.
your fifth year, that's right, okay. Because you just
Yeah, I
got,
just got reelected.
that's
Yep.
right. Wow. Who did,
Yeah.
what was your winning margin by? Did you just destroy your competition? I didn't follow your race. It must not have been a hotly contested race.
So we're a partisan seat here in Marion County. So we're all partisan Republicans.
Thank
And I
God.
actually did not draw an opponent.
How is that possible?
Well, if you want, I could tell you, this is my perspective is I work really hard to be present for everybody in the community, my whole county, because we're elected countywide. And um, my areas of passion, the work that I really focus on as a commissioner, are super relatable to everybody that lives here. And so, because I'm so willing to enter into all the spaces, invited or not, I'd like to think that maybe I'm not as contentious as I could be as a Republican, and also maybe the appetite for the community. If I'm being a little less egotistical about how great I am, uh, could be that Salem is pretty fatigued over their recent mayor race,
Hmm.
and the the progressive base in Marion County is predominantly in Salem. And
Oh yeah.
they had a race last year, and it was big. So, I mean, when my seat is competing at the same time as that mayor seat, I would think that they just really focused their efforts on that mayor seat, even though they lost it.
Yeah.
They really doubled down on it.
I mean,
And
with that payroll tax, did they expect to win anything? I mean, did
absolutely they did. Have you met them? I mean, not to be disrespectful, because I
what a
think they
dumb
all believe
idea.
in what they were doing, but they really believed in all that. And it's
Dumb.
unfortunate, because it was really a lack of creativity, in my opinion, for them just to throw it out there without a thoughtful process.
No, no, there was no. And then did you run? So there's three of you, I know that, but did you run by
Yeah,
yourself or was somebody else up as well?
by myself. Yeah,
Okay. So Commissioner Willis he's him and who's the other one?
Commissioner Commissioner Cameron,
Cameron, of course,
Kevin Cameron. Yeah, they run on the off cycle.
former state representative.
That's
Um,
right.
Commissioner Willis was in DC. We saw him on Monday, or I saw him on Monday for the first time, but
He
that was
was there. Yeah, he flew
yeah.
in on late Friday night, and Commissioner Cameron was going to be there, but he flew to New York with his wife and stayed in New York, and then they were going to take a train on Monday down to DC.
Yeah.
But since the inauguration, our plans got canceled. They just stayed in New York and watched it there, which he said was great.
Yeah, that was I mean, it would have been fun to be outside and for people to see that, I don't know how
Yeah,
many would have filled up that. I don't know how many people were really there, but there would have been easily a couple 100,000 from what we saw,
yeah,
and it would have been neat to be outside. But I think my real opinion on it was the liberals love to like say, oh, there wasn't going to be anybody there and blah, blah, blah. That's why they moved it indoors and the weather was a lie. I think it was really security because the amount of security that we saw and the amount of like moving of targets where they were shutting streets down
that's right.
and reopening
Yeah,
them randomly. I think there was some real security threats that they were really concerned about. I mean, geez, they tried killing the guy twice. I mean,
I know.
the one last
I'm
shot.
grateful for the security that they had. It was a little difficult to navigate, but I think if, I went into it with, once I got over the initial disappointment of not being able to be in the seat that I had a ticket for the inauguration,
Yeah.
embracing kind of just the celebration and the experience, it was a great experience for me. I mean, even like, on Monday when we're all walking through
Yeah.
trying to get to Congressman Bence's office to watch and we couldn't get there. That was fun for me, just to be talking and navigating the
Yeah.
audiences of massive amounts of people. And it was a bummer, but I still had a great time.
There was, I mean, we almost thought every time we're like, oh, I think we're almost there. I think we just kept getting, it was like in a mousetrap. Like you didn't
You should
know.
see the blister I have on my heel to like show the work that we put in to do all that walking.
Yeah, it was. And the reality was, you probably should have left your hotel originally, and just took the Uber all the way around because he had to go
Well,
all the way out and around. Apparently, how to get
yes.
back to the Capitol. But yeah, it is what it is. I think we have
Yeah, it was fun.
more fun in the bar, to be honest. But
Well, and I do think that weather did play a factor. I mean, when we were out there, it was like what, 18 degrees
yeah, and that
at
wind
one point?
was blowing. It was cold.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so like imagine like we're walking and we were cold, but imagine if we were sitting in the chairs that we were assigned, waiting for hours because we had to have gotten there hours before in the cold. Like that would have been miserable.
yeah. No, it would have been horrible. Well, and I think getting back to your commission stuff and the fact that
Yeah.
nobody, and you were the only one that ran.
Yeah.
Nobody, so they only had to field one candidate, and they couldn't
So
do that.
they did a write-in campaign. There was so
Those
they
work
were
well.
they did work really hard to find a Democrat opponent. And in fact I talked to all of the interested people but one, and nobody filed in time. And then they did a write-in campaign, and the write-in actually did pretty well. She got enough write-ins to accept the nomination and could have been on the ballot in November, and then ultimately decided not to do it.
Mm.
So it's a lot of effort put out for that. Unfortunate, but I was prepared to obviously run a full out campaign and be able to be in this space educating folks about the work I'm doing and
Yeah,
what Marion County is doing as a whole. I actually really enjoy doing that kind of advertising and sharing. And so as much as you can look forward to a campaign, I was looking forward to that component of it. And I still did a fair amount of it,
yeah.
just with
Just
just me.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, well, you have to. And I mean, I think I was reading like you've served or have served on like 17 boards, you
Yeah.
know, committees throughout. I mean, like you said, you were everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Association of Oregon Counties president. I mean, you've literally been everywhere. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes the calculation of that makes people just say, like, I have no, and Marion County leans a little right, obviously, for the whole county, with
Right.
Salem being kind of the left center of it. I think people just look at that and go, one, I got to figure out how to raise a bunch. There's not traditional money in commissioner races, so that you get from lobby or all the unions. I
Right.
mean, they'll throw in something, but nothing that they would need to take out a powerful incumbent. So somebody looks at that and says, well, how am I going to go raise $250,000? You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And unfortunately, races are, I mean, across the scale of all seats have gotten way out of control, in my opinion. When I first ran in 2020, my PAC itself um, spent well over $150,000, but then all in, with other PACs that were
yeah,
contributing to the campaign, it was, over $200,000. And my opponent then raised and kind of contributed to about that because it was an open seat.
yeah,
And then my strategy is just to come out of the gate as soon as possible to fundraise early. And so I did that after I got elected took my seat in 2021. So I came into this race with a healthy pack I didn't want to spend my whole year in 2024 fundraising, especially because I was the president of Association of Oregon Counties. I was doing a lot of policy work and participating in different counties and jurisdictions and at the Capitol. My time was really consumed. And so I had to create a real good plan to be
yeah.
successful in a campaign and in the role I was filling, which was pretty important to me.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, and it paid off at the end of the day, not
Yeah.
waiting. What I love about Marion County, and I think this is why you have such a unique perspective in my mind, being a Marion County commissioner. And Clackamas County is probably a little bit in the same vein, but you have everything you could possibly have in Oregon is crammed into one county. You
Yeah.
got I-5 down the middle, you got a major city in Salem, you got rural farmland, you have rural urban interface, you got forest land, I mean, there's everything you could think of in Marion
Yeah.
County. And I find so that unique perspective being a commissioner, you don't come at it from just like the city mayor perspective. Like you literally have to go uh up to like St. Paul and talk about rodeo and the life in that portion of Marion County and
Yes.
make your way out to Detroit to talk about wildfire resiliency and then go downtown and talk about homelessness.
Yes.
Truly amazing county.
It's my favorite. I'm a little bit biased, but you're right. We are probably one of the most diverse counties in the state. And, we're equally urban and equally rural. People don't realize that when they look at the geography. And that equal margins is also in population. We equally have the same amount of rural residents that we have urban residents. And
Nice.
so we also have 20 incorporated cities. We have the most cities of any county in the state of Oregon. That's 20 city councils that we get to work with. And there's pros and cons to that, but what it does is it allows us to be really active at the local level.
Yeah.
When you have that many people working through different leadership styles, and representing, whether it's IDANA, that's an incorporated city.
Yeah.
They have a mayor and a city council, and there's like, 150 people or something, probably not even that many. I'm probably way exaggerating their population, and then Salem, it's got 150,000 people. It's just like,
You know,
all right, tell me about this. Let's get into the weeds. Let's figure it
yeah.
out. And I'm a total weed. I love to get into the weeds. And that's one of the best parts about being a commissioner is I'm not just a policymaker. I don't just make stuff up. I'm actually providing service and can create projects and services and watch those be executed within our systems. And I really enjoy that work because it's really, I think, how the county can thrive is when their policymakers are front and center, the front lines, if you will, seeing how people are responding to and what their needs are and actually deploying them.
How does it work on the commission in that? Because I live in Kirk County, we have one city Prineville. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's probably, and our city county works pretty well together, but it's kind of easy because you only have one city, right? So you don't really
Yeah.
have to worry about it. They share building inspectors, all that sort of stuff, right? The city doesn't even have
Yep.
a building inspector because there's no reason to have one.
Yeah.
Obviously, that can't be the case in Marion County, I wouldn't think. So, how does that work? Like the relationship between the county and the cities you're pretty like take homelessness, right? How does that work? How do you pay for stuff? Like, how do you guys, is everybody different or is it just a tough navigation process?
To answer the question with one word, it's everything. So it's everything you just described. And um, the city of Salem, as an example, over the last couple of years, has chosen as a jurisdiction to use one-time funding to fund social service systems of care for homeless response. The largest homelessness population in our county is in Salem.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And as a city, they are not sanctioned or designed to be a service delivery system of human services. So they don't get to bill for any of that work that they're putting money out of. They funded about $8.2 million over the last few years, every year, money into community-based organizations to do homelessness response work to try to get, to solve the problem. Those funds go away. They dry up as of June 30th. So they're divesting, is what they're saying, from that work. We've not had a very robust partnership with the city of Salem over the last couple of years because of philosophical differences, because of the political divide. Frankly,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the root of it. And the narrative of how service delivery works or doesn't work. But next week on the 30th, for the first time, we'll be hosting a joint work session with the City Council of Salem. And we'll be providing an education and having a conversation with them around the healthcare system, the human services system, behavioral health, and hoping that through that dialogue, we can help them understand that we don't have all the resources. We're only gifted what the state feels we're worthy of,
Yeah.
or whatever grants we apply to. And we have to live within our means, which means we have to be really concerted about what our model looks like and what our expectations are and what accountability to those service dollars are. And we're very, very thoughtful about that. I think in some people's perspective, they would, we've been called mean and lacking compassion because we require people to engage in services, but that's actually the design of the system. In Oregon, all county providers in the healthcare space, when they extend services, have to have that individual that needs that service enter into the service system so they can bill for it.
Yeah.
We don't fund healthcare out of our general fund. We don't, and our general fund is what we do, we collect through property taxes. The healthcare system in every county in Oregon is funded out of the legislature through the Oregon Health Authority and also other grants. Like we have several federal grants that we have access to that we've secured to do our work. It's different in every city though. Like I said before, we have 20 cities. So we work really hard to understand what their challenges are and then educate and navigate is really our biggest priority, making sure that the elected leaders in all the cities around us understand how the system works and then kind of turn the open sign on or find the doorway here as bright as possible so they can navigate or send people our direction, and then we just work with anybody that comes. You live in Marion County, like if you live here and you qualify, we will provide a service to you.
Have you had the same challenges like, because Kaiser's right next to Salem, do you have kind of the same challenges with their city council or?
No.
No.
We only have had this hurdle with the city of Salem, and I believe it really is political. I mean, if not that you should, but if you wanted to, you could listen to the previous city council, the one that was there before 2 weeks ago, and the way they've talked about homelessness and addressing homelessness is at what some have considered the right to fail approach.
Hmm.
So they funded low barrier or no barrier organizations, meaning that of that $8.2 million that they've invested in these community-based organizations, individuals who are actively using drugs can come into those shelter sites and actively use drugs. Now, the difference is that those shelter sites don't let them use drugs on site, but they have very relaxed
So across the street.
or on the sidewalk, because the sidewalk is not
Yeah.
owned by the shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of unfortunate issues around it. There is a path forward in my, from the lens that I'm looking through to be able to address some of the challenges, but it's philosophical, and it comes down to accountability and what you determine, how you define compassionate accountability. And for me, that's like, I just had a lunch today with a transitional housing provider that works specifically in the addiction space. They're essentially a low barrier transitional provider, but you cannot actively be using any type of substance to be living in their homes. That's their only barrier. Now, people can fail out. People do fail out while they're navigating recovery, but they have to follow rules and be in compliance. And so we were just kind of navigating like what their service system looks like and the definition of high versus low barrier. We have to have those conversations in our community with kind of all of our elected leaders to draw the line in the sand, if you will, as to what our community expectations are, and then really work hard to meet those community expectations. And all I have heard since I've been a commissioner is we need to compassionately bring people into care, require them to get treatment, and require them to engage in services so they can live a healthy, stable life. And people are willing to pay for that if the outcome is stabilization. But if it's not, then they don't want to pay for that and they don't want it in their community. So it's an interesting rub. There's friction around that, as you're aware, statewide, and
Yeah.
how we address it.
And I think because the difference is I think there's a lot of people when you talk about low barrier, high barrier, that's basically conditions of your ability to stay wherever you're at, right? The high barrier, and then you have kind of like the no harm, like which is like zero barriers, right? That was some of where some of the really the Measure 110 proponents really wanted us, like you just have these, we call them drug dens. I think they had other names for them, but
sure.
But that's like the extreme side of it, like, oh, here's the needles that we'll hand out to you, and here's all the, just do no harm, or don't, basically you just couldn't be violent, I think, was the only thing you couldn't do in those sort of facilities. And I think the odd thing about all of that is getting rid of Measure 110, and I think you were a big proponent of pushing to recriminalize Measure 110, and I want to ask you about how you're seeing, because now what are we about 4 months in on it actually happening, 5 months in, to get your
October 1st.
Maybe like tell me why recriminalization was so important, and then looking forward, is it gonna make a difference or did we cross the Rubicon, or did we catch it in time, I guess is what I'm always wondering, like, did we catch it fast enough before it got too big?
Well, okay. There's a lot of questions in that.
I know it.
So
back to one, take me down the path of why you guys were for recriminalization.
Yeah. Well, because people were dying, and it was obvious that people were dying, and they, yeah. I mean, when people start dying, you should really be paying attention. And we had a significant overdose rate, and it climbed like a skyrocket in a matter of a year. And the data is always really slow to come about, but it's completely unacceptable that we still today have people dying on the streets of drug overdose. Like, completely unacceptable to me. It escalated our property crimes. So people who were just living their average lives were becoming victims, and the victim rate in most of the urban areas has, in some cases, tripled. There was no accountability for those victims. And we're not talking about like someone broke into their car and, stole whatever they had in the back seat. Like, cars were being stolen on a daily basis. People's homes were being broken into. People were being physically assaulted in their own homes. We have a restaurant in downtown Salem that every week for like 6 weeks was getting broken into and lost uh, hundreds of thousands of dollars in goods, and no repercussions. Like nobody's bailing them out of that major debt that they're acquiring now because of this harm. The livable space in our communities were just getting destroyed. And if you walk along, this is an example. I invite anybody who's paying attention to this to want to see it. Walk along the Willamette River in Salem, and you count the number of hypodermic needles that are along the water banks, or the homeless camps that have doubled in size with items that they've stolen from every restaurant in downtown Salem. The number of propane tanks that are existing in the creeks along the waterway to get to the Willamette is insane. The decriminalization effort, I think, was the interest in compassionate care of saying somebody who has an addiction probably has trauma. There's something in them. They didn't just wake up one day and decide to become an addict. Something happened. Maybe they partied too much and they fell into it. Like, who knows? There's a variety of origins where they entered into that space. The reality is they're into that space. And for the population of people to say that they're going to be able to make a conscious decision of their own to enter into treatment, which is one of the most physically difficult things a human can do, is go through sobriety into recovery, is insane. They can't do it on their own. They need help. So when we watched the failure over the couple of years that it was decriminalized, I mean, our system of care became overwhelmed. The foster care system in Oregon became overwhelmed. Every resource I have was taxed. Our solid waste system, our public safety system, our healthcare system, because everybody was failing out around us. And the common sense solution was to say, hey, we need to recriminalize this. And we could do it creatively. That's what we ended up with when House Bill 4002 finalized and passed during the 2024 session. Was it strong enough? Is to be debatable. That is to be determined. I can tell you right now, it's a very slow start for all counties, including mine, who the model was designed after. Marion County developed a diversion program, which now we're calling deflection because it's I guess a nicer word. I don't know. Through a grant. Yeah. Through a grant that we received in 2016. So Marion County has been doing deflection for several years with our law enforcement and healthcare team. We were able to take that work and enhance it in a more robust system of care in partnership with our courts. And it's been a very slow start. So we kicked off October 1st, like everybody else. And we have only to date, as of yesterday, I got data yesterday, had 13 people enter into our treatment system of care. And that number is pretty important because we have about 1,000 people on a docket that have committed low-level crimes because of their drug addiction, who are sitting on that court docket waiting for a defense attorney to be present for them to be held accountable in the court. Some of those people have been on that docket for more than a year. Their victims are still out there in the wind, not getting any level of reassurance that they won't be victimized again. And if there was restitution, who knows if they'll ever see it. So the whole thing is broken in general. And I think it's going to take, well, I know for a fact it's going to take a really long time to fix it. And because the system is currently designed with this low barrier, overly compassionate model, I don't know that we'll ever get out of this hole. Simply because people have the choice to say no, thank you. And I'm all about freedom. Like, I'm all about freedom. But there has to be a logical conversation around about your freedom, my freedom, and their freedom. And if my freedom is being taken away from me because some drug addict is now, so in a drug-induced state of psychosis, they're causing harm to me, who's representing me? And right now, I don't have any representation in the legislature because of the double supermajority. I mean, the people that I ask to represent me are obviously the minority, and often not invited to the conversations. And counties are often not invited to the conversations. And so we're fighting our way to those tables with evidence and all the data possible to try to form the narrative to create real stabilized environments, but it's going to take us a long time.
Shouldn't the next level then, speaking of like the Association of Oregon Counties, which is a pretty powerful organization in Salem for sure. I mean, we tend to let you guys come in and have meetings with us. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
that's right.
because the voice is it's a cross section, right? So you have Multnomah County, you got Washington County, you guys,
Lane County.
rural,
Yeah.
urban, yeah, you got everybody. Uh, it always seems like the counties, to me, the next step of 4,002, and the other part of it is there's a lot of money
I know.
around. I mean, we're last thing I looked at, I think it was 1.2 billion.
That's right.
Billion. I mean, it's
My
not Elon
county,
Musk money, but it's close. I mean,
my region in 2024, which is Marion and Polk counties through our COC, were recipients of $26 million.
and you have 13
That,
care, 13.
well, that's
Do the math.
different. So that's a different system, right? But the COC is the continuum of care for
Yeah.
homelessness. They received $26 million out of the state executive order that the governor signed. And the data they've reported in is somewhere around 900 households were helped with that $26 million. And that's great, but we're not talking about 900 permanently stabilized households.
Hold on,
What
I'm
they
doing
can't tell,
the math. That's
okay,
$28,888 per household.
right. And a household could be one person if it just in full
Yeah.
transparency. And more often than not, it's one person, it's not multiples. We have less families in need than we have individuals in that system of care. But when it comes to the House Bill 4002 work, there's money floating around everywhere, but what they didn't do was fund counties for the work. So House Bill 4002 is the policy, like the words of the recriminalization effort. And then House Bill 50, I think it's 5402 or 5204, I forget which. That was the funding bill. Statewide, they, threw a dart at the wall and picked a number. But in my county of 350,000 people, we received just over $1.2 million to do this work. I know that most people think like that's a lot of money. It is not anywhere near enough money to scrape the surface to have the outreach team and the system, the outreach,
Yeah.
people on the outside
Yeah.
collecting people to come in. The inside team, which is the healthcare team, which is funded through the marijuana dollars through the Behavioral Health Resource Network system that was set up in 2021, is robustly funded. And there is more than enough treatment. Any organization in the state, whether it's county, the government, or a CBO in the county that received burn funding must be accessible the day a person decides to go into treatment. We scaled up outside of our burn money. We scaled up even higher with the resources from the 5204 so law enforcement who's interacting with these folks in the community could call a hotline and say, I have a person here that's ready to go into treatment. Someone's answering that phone 24/7. We've only taken in from the city of Salem, which is our biggest jurisdiction, 2 calls in 4 months.
Wow.
So also I'd say the counter narrative is like, well, it's going to take time for people to learn about it. We need to educate people. We need to let them know that it's there. And that's true. And every single law enforcement jurisdiction in this county that we trained, our district attorney's office went out and trained them. Our sheriff's office went out and trained them. We hosted town halls and forums to train them. They're all waiting. The problem is that the people have to agree to be transported into treatment. And if they say no, unless they've committed a crime, they get to continue to fail out in the space that they're in.
Yeah, that's where I mean, it seems to be, well, there's 2 big problems I see is in Senator Anderson, I'm his chief of staff, and he's
I
on
love
the
him.
joint task force with Senator Lieber. And, so I've been kind of following that stuff with them and engaged in those conversations. And they're literally just trying to figure out where all the money's coming in and where it's all going. Like they can't even get that simple.
It's really not that
figured out.
complicated. It's not that complicated. All you have to do is ask a county. The problem that exists, in my opinion, is that we have a bunch of, I wouldn't say a bunch. We have some well-intentioned legislators. I don't know that we have a bunch in that building, but we have some who really want to fix the problem that we're in. I'll even use Senator Lieber as an example. She takes my calls. I talk to her as often as I can, invite her into the spaces and expose her to the information. As much as she wants to fix this problem, and I really believe she does, she also has to campaign again, right? So they're always looking to figure out how they can win their next race while they're still doing this work. And therein lies an issue where they can't double down on what they think is right, because if it goes against the narrative they have to campaign on in a year or two from now, it really poses some challenges for them. And not every county is the same. There's a saying the Association of Oregon Counties has: when you've seen one county, you've seen one county. And what that means is we are all different. Not one county in the state of Oregon is the same. Our structures aren't designed the same. Our funding isn't the same. Our demographics, geography, etc., not the same, which is awesome. The experts in this area is the county commissioners and our teams, and we are more often than not left out of the discussion. Even when they were designing House Bill 4002, while I was the president of the Association of Oregon Counties, we had to practically kick the door down and flex our legal authority as county commissioners to the legislature to say, you can do whatever you want and you can talk to whatever sheriff and whatever DA you want, but until a county commissioner and their board agrees, this isn't happening, because we have the budgetary authority to bring money in and to spend money. Nobody else has that budgetary authority. And it took a lot of educating, a lot of time, spending a lot of time with different legislators, especially the ones on that joint committee, of helping them access information and data and explain to them how the systems work in every single county. And we have very, very big extremes. We have Multnomah County and we have Lake County, literally on opposite sides of the state.
Yeah.
And I understand the challenge that those legislators face by trying to design a policy that's a one-size-fits-all approach. I do feel that they did the best they could with what time they had available to them. It wasn't like the session was that long. But there's still a lot of work to be done on it. I know Senator Lieber is invested in it. I know that Representative Kropp is invested in it, as are all the committee members. I think in April, when we all have to come forward to the legislature with our kind of performance review, if you will be super telling. Some counties never even opted in to participate because they were like, this is a shit show. You're not even telling us what you want us to do, and you're not funding us enough. Like, my $1.4 million is a far cry from the $187,000 Benton County received. That $187,000 barely pays for one position.
Yeah, I don't even know what that does.
What are we talking about here? Like, that's a joke. And the scale, the way they designed it, they say it was based on the scale of need. And the question to me is like, who are you getting your scale of needs from? OHA, the most unapproachable, detached agency in the state of Oregon? Like, they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
They got direction from the governor to study it all in the first year she took office. And we're still waiting for those studies to come out. It's 2 years in.
If I was the governor, I would get rid of OHA altogether, and then I would redo that agency. I would literally just like, you're just gone, like just go away, because not only that, you have zero trust in Oregonians in that agency on any level. It's probably the worst. DEQ is probably up there with them, maybe DMV. I don't know, but I would say OHA is probably the worst, and it's our biggest gluttonous agency we have. And it would make most sense to get rid of all that stuff. See, I really believe that in this space, in this mental health, homelessness, behavioral health, the best way to do it is just to give money to you guys.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
You guys do with what you need to do, because every county is different. Like, some counties need a bigger jail. They've only got 2 beds, or they only got 20 beds and they need 60 because the people their sheriffs bring in, and they, like you said, you got 20 cities, other ones got 4, so there's they got city police departments that can do things. Like, you can't mandate a top down on this level. I think it can only be, and it'll never be solved. And I agree. I'm glad that you said that, because I hate it when people keep talking about solving homelessness. It will never be solved. Stop saying it. Behavioral
Yeah.
health, mental health, we all have mental health and behavioral health issues on some level. We've all
Yeah.
dealt with tragedy, I was reading even like, your mom had a bunch, you grew up in that problem,
Yeah.
right? Mental health and all the things. So we've all had, my mom had behavioral health issues and mental
Yeah.
health stuff and substance abuse issues and stuff. So that's never
We
going to
can
go
get a
away.
handle on it though. Like, I don't want to be the person that says it's never going to be fixed, because we can correct the system. And it's actually, in my opinion, not that complicated to correct it. Oregon Health Authority is a train wreck of an agency. It has way, way too many people working in it to make up the way they want to do things. The amount of rules that organization produces on an annual basis is asinine.
Yeah.
The contracts that we like, the contract that my county has with OHA when we renew it, which happens about every other month because of something, is literally like this thick.
Wow.
And we're just adding amendments to it. At first, when I first became a commissioner, I had them print it so I could read it. When they printed it, I about died. I was like, this is like reading an encyclopedia.
It's like a
And also,
Bible.
I'm not sure where the end is. Like, Jesus, where does it end? And now they just amend it every, like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't even get me into that. But anyway, it's a train wreck of an organization. What Oregon doesn't do it's almost intentional, I think, is invest in prevention. There's these different areas where you can go around the state, and the philosophical differences that we have from Northeast Oregon to Southwest Oregon to whatever is real. The way people live in rural Oregon, whether it's in the north or the south or the east or the west, is different than the urban areas. The way they choose to live their life. And all of that is fine. It's like, I love the way people live so differently. But it's my job to make sure, as a county commissioner in my very diverse county, that I can meet the needs of the people in all corners and all sectors of my county. I can get in my car and drive to every point in my county any day of the week with less than an hour. I can be a responsive person to my community. Oregon Health Authority can't do that. It's not their job to do that. In fact, their job is to take the policy of the legislature and figure out how to fund the needs of the counties. And they should be listening to us when we're asking for what our needs are and how we need them met. And they should take those asks and they should formulate that into a budget formula and write the check. Instead, what they do is they make us jump through all these policy hoops that have all these agendas overlaid on top of them, because they don't want to give us the control we are elected to have at the local level. It's the same with city councilors. Like, I'm not going into these 20 cities telling them how to design their roads. They got elected for that. They got elected to determine where to put the park and how many stoplights to have. But the state doesn't trust local jurisdictions. That's the bottom line. They want to house all the power. They get all the money because the legislature gives it to them. And so we get to sit here and fight for it. And some counties do it better than others.
Yeah.
And it's tragic.
The prevention
But we
piece.
could invest in prevention, just so you know. Like, we don't
Yeah.
invest in Oregon in prevention. We could get out of these issues as far as homelessness and housing insecurity and whatever. I get a list of things that could go on through public health that we could invest in prevention and fix some of these problems. But I don't think, honestly, I do not think the Democrats in leadership want to fix the problems, because I think it creates job security for them when they just let holy hell rain loose and we
Yeah.
just flounder through it. I
Well,
feel that way.
and NGOs too. I mean, all the nonprofits. I mean, think
Yeah.
about I heard years ago when Eugene used to be just the homeless problem, right? Before it became a real problem in Portland and other areas.
Yeah.
Portland always had some homeless people. Like, it's never, I'm 50 years old. I never not remember being downtown Portland and not seeing homeless people. Now I get that. Now you see people shitting on the sidewalk and doing drugs everywhere. But before, at least you'd see somebody, pushing a cart. And my uncle was homeless. He died. He took a header off a parking garage, killed himself downtown Portland. And that was 20 some years ago. But his was alcohol, right? It wasn't really maybe what other drugs were available then. But I think you're right. Like, it's access and education on the prevention. So how do we curb because I think fentanyl was a game changer, right? All that shit
Yeah.
coming across the border, and
Yep.
hopefully Trump is going to get some of that stuff nailed down. Of course, we don't care in Oregon because we're a sanctuary state. You know, we want everything and anything over the border here. And then education, like with the young people, we have to really focus on that. And you don't see those immediate results, but you would over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where the focus has to be. And to your point on the solving the problem, like kick it down to you guys, let you guys figure out your processes for the barriers of entry for getting people help, forcing people to get help. And if
Yeah.
they don't want to get help in Salem, then they can go to Portland, right? Because Salem says, well, if you're going to do drugs in our community, this is what's going to happen. And then that person is either going to go into treatment or they're probably going to move on, right? Because
Right.
they want to be happy.
Yes. That's right.
And
The
I think that's,
migration of addiction is real.
yeah, I think so. And
Yeah.
then go to the next one. And then if that's not really, so you're not really solving the problem, you're moving the problem, but you're moving
Yeah.
the problem who's to an area who's not solving the problem. So then when they all end up in Multnomah County, it can be their problem. Of course, then they'll get all the money and they'll say you guys don't need it anymore. But that's the point. You
Well,
don't
they're getting all the money now, so it doesn't matter. They get a bulk of the money now, and they're still not solving the problem. And I get way less money, and we are making headway, just not enough. You know, it's an unnoticeable amount of change. And I know over time as we continue to kind of put our words into action, which is what we do as county
Yeah.
commissioners. We get up on a stage and say, this is what I'm going to do, the direction I'm going. The locals can see the proof in that. It either works or it doesn't, because it's happening kind of daily in front of you. Even with my population here, the idea of solving any of these issues does feel a bit unattainable. It feels so big. And I think, again, it's like I was just listening to you. It was like when the Ronald Reagan administration implemented DARE. You know, don't do drugs.
Yeah.
Just say no to drugs. That was my, I was born in 1979. So I literally grew up in the 80s when that was like, it was on every freaking bathroom doorway in every school I went to. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
The same thing with solid waste, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle. They funded that, both of those campaigns, like extensively. It was a part of the education system. It was required by the Federal Department of Education for DARE to be a program deployed in all schools, public schools, and so was the 3 R's. We don't do that anymore in America, and and what we do here in Oregon in that space is more of the progressive agenda of harm, in my opinion. You know, we teach kids to choose their sexuality over character, and we're introducing adult topics to innocent young minds that can't comprehend the space, and so we're creating chaos, in my opinion. But we don't have comprehensive repeated programming around the things that can harm you in the world. Again, it's that drawing that line in the sand. It's parents and community members saying, I'm doing the best I can as a parent to provide access and education to my kids. But boy, there's nothing wrong with somebody else providing that information too. And if you don't like it, get involved to change it. But we don't really have a good concerted effort to have messaging out there. Fentanyl and xylazine are here in America. They're for sure here in Oregon. They're causing major problems in my community. And nobody so far in leadership that's got the gavel is willing to draw the line, to say no more. I mean, when Jackson County declared an emergency because the cartel was there, it took them a year to get any response from the state and the feds that was comprehensive enough for them to make a difference. Once that happened, they just moved north. I mean, we have an issue here in Marion County with the cartel. And people think, oh, well, what's the big deal with growing marijuana? Well, it turns out they're not just growing marijuana.
Yeah.
They're sex trafficking. They're blending drugs into their marijuana. They're lacing it with, xylazine and fentanyl, or, whatever they come up
Addicted, they
with.
got to create customers. Yeah.
I know, but it's killing people.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched a video on Instagram the other day, something new that I learned that I wish I would have known before. But when somebody goes into an overdose, and you Narcan them, if the substance is still in their system when the Narcan wears off, they can go back into that overdose.
Hmm.
I didn't know that. I watched that perform on the streets of Portland through an Instagram page that I watch where, um, what is the name of the ambulance service that serves Portland?
Okay.
AMR, I think is
AMR.
what it is.
AMR.
Was doing a response to this individual and they couldn't get him out of his overdose. And then when they finally did, they left because they had to go to the next call. But the people filming the situation stayed. And after, 20 minutes or so, the guy went back into the overdose. They had to call 911 again. It's crazy. The things that are going on is just, it's not okay.
Well, you're obviously following that in the legislature this session. So, as a county commissioner,
Yeah.
what are the things are you looking to see in 2025? And we're going to probably have to do this again. We'll do it in April when when you said when you
Okay.
guys report back to the legislature, we'll do another one
Yeah.
and say, so what happened with that?
Yeah. So some of the things that I'm tracking pretty closely are around civil commitment in two ways, not just the mental health side, but the addiction side. The state of Washington, a handful of years ago, passed a law called Ricky's Law. And State Representative Bobby Levy is carrying a piece of legislation that mirrors that. And it's civil commitment for people who are using substances.
Hmm.
We need that. We need to be able to bring people who are in the throes of substance use into treatment against their will because they need help. And there's scales of that, right? I'm not suggesting that we take people and we lock them up and throw away the key in some institution because nobody can afford that and it's not the right thing to do. But they do need to get into treatment. And we don't have enough treatment systems of care from, detox to sobering centers to even inpatient beds. But we do have enough to get started on that work. So I'm really hoping that that bill passes. A kind of a parallel bill to that is a civil commitment bill around mental health. There's 5 pieces of legislation that kind of cross over in that space. There's one being championed by NAMI Oregon that I've been following pretty closely and working along the peripheral with. Really hopeful that that gets passed because we need to lower the civil commitment bar in Oregon in order to help people who have severe and persistent mental illness get access to treatment. The problem with those bills, though, just to be fully transparent, is the transportation part. Because of use of force law that's really restricted law enforcement's ability to transport people currently in Oregon, unless that person's committed a crime, law enforcement can't engage to transport. So I've been in conversations with all the legislators that are carrying civil commitment bills and then others that are really interested in it through the Judiciary Committee and Healthcare Committee on real solutions because counties really need that solution. Marion County really needs that solution. The state hospital is in our county, and we have a pretty high rate of people who get sent here because of mental health issues that the state can just release onto the street if they want to. And then that falls into our area of
Do we run into
concern.
capacity if you actually succeed with these with the civil commitments? Do you run into like capacity for like where these people get
Like a lack of beds?
Yeah, I mean, state
Yeah.
hospital is only so big. We haven't
Yeah,
built.
so we don't if we look at the capacity issue with just the narrow lens, the state's always looked at it as like the state hospital is the only resource, then we absolutely do. But there's other ways. The scale of civil commitment is kind of based on the forensic evaluation of the individual. They don't all have to be locked up in a building. They do need secure structures around them, and we can look at community placement, but we need to look at that with like a really dedicated lens of like, you have to be here. And if you can't stay here, then you're going to have to go here because you need this help. We need the smart, interested people to come around the table to be really creative and braid all those solutions together. Because I don't believe that we're going to need this grand capacity forever. It would be a huge lift of resources to go bring all these beds online. And then in 5 years, not need them. I don't know that that's the best use of dollars. There's lots of facilities in the state right now that are being unused that could be retrofitted. Hillcrest is a great example of one here in Salem. It used to be a youth detention facility that's been sitting there for 10 years, just sitting there. It has some challenges, but we have a current bidder in an organization called Madrona Recovery out of Portland that wants to bring it online for juveniles to do dual diagnosis care, which is awesome. And that can scale from 20 beds to 60 beds. And you can scale it down and you can modify the buildings to be other resource systems. You just have to be creative and you have to be willing to kind of do the work and not be afraid to take the risk. And right now, we don't have anybody in the governor's staff, and really not even the governor, because I've talked to her about this a few times directly, willing to take that risk to just say, let's be creative and let's solve this crisis, because the crises aren't meant to last forever.
What? Let's talk about the governor for a second. What is the hesitancy? Just that crazy base that wants free drugs, free stuff. Like I don't know, like what? Because I feel like the governor because why wouldn't, I mean, she made it a crisis. She created the crisis. She's thrown billions of dollars at it. She clearly doesn't want that hanging over her head from a campaign perspective, but yet we probably know it's not solvable. And she's clearly not doing the steps I would think if somebody truly thought it was a crisis and truly wanted to solve it. So what's the end game? I'm trying to figure out what the end game is. And that's the part I struggle with this one, because why would you really want more homeless people? Like, what is that getting you? And that's what I'm trying to understand.
I wish I could answer that for
Yeah,
you. When I see her next, maybe I should just ask her, because I'll be
I would
honest, I have
too. I
had,
just saw her 2 weeks ago. I should have mentioned it to her
me
when.
too. I was probably there in the same space as you. I enjoy my conversations with the governor. She's been, you know, kind of difficult to get into the space, even in my role as AOC president. It took me 3 or 4 very persistent months to get her to schedule a meeting with me. But then once she agreed to that, she was like, we should do this regularly, which I appreciated that she valued being in that space with me. I was like, okay, let's do this. And what I could imagine is she's not, she's always only been a policymaker. She's only ever been in the legislature. She's never been in my seat as a commissioner. She doesn't fully have a grasp on how the systems work. And so she has to operate off of who she trusts and the information they're sharing with them. And I think that she has some really smart people around her. There's 2 women that I have worked with that work for her that I think are amazing. But they're pretty restricted in their ability, and they get restricted because of the legislature. Like the governor's office isn't like the end all be all free, like make it happen. There's a lot of restrictions on what the governor can do based on law created by the legislature and the funding that goes with those laws or policies. And I think also because she doesn't have a good grasp on how the structures work within the county systems and the state system and how they braid together, even with federal help, it's going to take her a long time, if she wants to even kind of come online with the ability to be creative and flexible in the systems that exist today. The idea that we're throwing $1.2 billion at the homeless crisis with the narrative that we need to go build more houses is a lobby narrative. Like, I have friends that work for the Home Builders Association. I love them. I hear them. And their job is to build houses because that's what pays their bills. That is their career choice. I'm not mad at them for that. Why would they disagree with her saying we need 30-some thousand units a year? I mean, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the other population is like, I have a community-based organization in Marion County that operates in Salem. That's annual budget is over $50 million a year to provide supported services to homelessness and rapid rehousing programs and permanent supported housing programs. Those dollars are state and federal dollars. Marion County is not writing them a check out of our general fund. They're just constantly getting money from the state, from Oregon Housing and Community Services, or DHS. What the problem the governor is realizing, and she has said this publicly, is the accountability component is missing. They're so far separated, the state agencies and any CBO, and there's so many down here and only one up here. It's impossible for them to hold every organization accountable
Yeah.
because they're so far away and there's not enough people to do that work. I have suggested to her that she look at a different model that we used to have in Oregon where all the money funneled through the county was held accountable to state dollars. And then we release the money into the community based on the expectation of that legislation. Now, commissioners could say no to the money if they don't want to deploy whatever those policies are. And that's where the rub lies, is that we have authority to say no thanks to whatever that agenda is. But in the case of like solving homelessness, like I just saw that Multnomah County funded a sobering center that's coming online pretty soon. I was excited about that. And then I looked into it and realized that there's no accountability, that they can go in and get sober up, go back out, get high, and come back again. It's just a revolving door.
Yeah.
That's like, where's the money come from for that? Like, I know that money used to grow on trees in Oregon when we thought it was a real natural resource and we cut trees for harvest. But we don't do that anymore. So it doesn't
Yeah.
grow on trees now, folks. So where's the money coming from? So
Well,
it's
from
a
employers, like you and me, and I mean, I think
yes,
between our companies that Vicky and I have, I think we employ 10 or 12 people. You guys have, do you still have your plumbing business and stuff?
yes, yeah, we own a plumbing
So
company.
yeah, so I mean, that's really how, but when you see these big companies like Intel and other ones laying people off and nobody really moving their big companies to Oregon, Daimler, trucks, like, they're going to start laying, like, why would you come here and do business in Oregon when you're going to pay 9% in employment taxes and all the things?
Right.
Uh, when we have a bad budget, then that's when they're going to come, because you're going to have to cut something, you know?
Well, are they? Because I feel like the conversation that they're having when Representative Nose went into the Oregonian and said, now that the Republicans are out of our way and we can raise taxes, I think that's a real thing. They're going to raise taxes. I
Yeah.
just don't know how much more blood you can get from the turnips that we are as Oregonians around here until we force everybody into poverty. And I feel like we're on a fast track to that. Like, I'm really concerned about the livability for people in my community, but in this state. Like, I mentioned earlier last year, I had the opportunity to go around the state to different counties working with AOC. And I drove through a lot of cities in various in a lot of the counties. And I mean, you see poverty of all scales. It just is different when it's in rural areas where there's no resources and services to help people connect, to whatever help. But then you go into Portland and I just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Raising taxes and not cutting is not sustainable. And
No.
until the voters require the legislature to live within the means that we as citizens say is enough, they're just going to continue to take and take. And they're not spending it wisely. They're just not.
Well, that's pretty clear. And there's no desire for accountability, because I think accountability goes back to their decisions when they did that. And I think that the agencies, and that's my biggest problem with the governor, is like, I thought she started off pretty strong.
Yeah.
Like, I think like her ideas were good. Like, she was coming in guns a-blazing on housing, and she was right to say we need 36,000 units. Turns out, based on yesterday's Eco Northwest report to the Senate Housing Committee, we need 100,000 homes like tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just to even, and we got to produce 4% a year just to maintain churn. And
Yeah.
we're never going to get there with the policies that we have in Oregon right now, and you can't throw good money after bad. Like, it's not going to, throwing money at housing doesn't solve the problem. The market has to solve the problem. And I think, and you're in a different space. Well, you obviously deal with that too on housing, but I think in this space of homelessness, mental health, like, it is nothing but a drain
Yeah.
on the system. There is no revenue money coming, I guess marijuana money and some of that, but there's no, but
Yeah. We're
we
not
don't
taxing the
need,
cartel or anything.
yeah, right. Maybe we should put a tax on the cartel. That's a good idea to find somebody. I'd be in favor of that. That's the tax I'd tell my people to vote for.
Well, I mean, if they would have brought it hand in hand, maybe it would have worked out and we could have just created some communities for people that wanted to fail out in their addiction. But I don't believe that anybody really wants to fail out in addiction. And I know that the people who have
Fix it.
mental health challenges are disconnected. I participated in a documentary that comes out early next month in Salem about the Salem homelessness and mental health issue. I don't know if they call it a crisis, I forget. And one of the questions that they asked was, whose responsibility is it to solve homelessness? And my response is, it's everyone's. I think I said it's yours. It's yours and mine and theirs. It's everyone's responsibility because we are people. We are uh, um, beings of connection. We need connection to thrive. And
Sure.
when people go into homelessness, they look for connection. Unfortunately, they look for it in the darkest spaces because that's the only thing that's available to them. We haven't really, like in Oregon, in my opinion, or to my knowledge, and maybe if it exists and someone hears this, they can send me the study, but we haven't really studied like the root of why we're in this crisis, aside from we want to blame it on the drug crisis. But we had a homelessness issue before Measure 110. It just got really exacerbated when Measure 110 passed.
Sure.
It became the drug issue and the insecurity and the poverty and the oppression and all the challenges that these people are experiencing were kind of more inside. But then Measure 110 passed and it became like approved, permission was granted for them to take it outside. So then we just saw all of the brokenness that these people experience flailing around in the streets because it was permitted. And I think that there is truth to some of the concerns around the recriminalization effort that we're just pushing drug use back inside. I have concerns about that, but that goes back to me saying we need to fund prevention.
Yeah.
And we need to fund programs like our housing authority systems who operate predominantly off of federal resources. They get really restricted on how they can access their tenants. I don't want somebody knocking on my door either. I want people to leave me be when I go home. But if I exert some type of a concern, I've done something that maybe alarms somebody or alerts somebody that something might be wrong, I think it is okay to knock on the door and say, hey, are you okay? Can I help you with something? And lean into that person to help them find stabilization and navigate through whatever their challenge is. That's not really permitted today in our supported housing systems of care that we've had online traditionally for my whole life, which has been housing authorities. I think we're shifting to that in these more vulnerable spaces that are really unregulated. I don't know if you know this, but in Oregon, transitional housing, this like around addiction, is unregulated. They are not required to be licensed by the state. And that's good and bad because I don't believe in government overreach as far as like telling people how to run their business or the space that they should operate. I do think it should be safe and secure. But we don't have anybody looking into that. And these populations are vulnerable. They are. I mean, it's a fact. And so now we're entering people into closed spaces behind doors, and they're vulnerable, and we don't know really what's going on in there. And that concerns me. I think there has to be a balance as to what we bring online to solve these problems, government oversight, but not government overreach. And
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if we get there. This session, there's a bunch of these topics being discussed from various legislators. I think Senator Reynolds has some bills in her momnibus package that I've been watching closely around housing and supported services for female, specifically moms.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll see how, it'll be interesting to see how she navigates some of that.
Well, I'll let you know. I'll be right in the middle of it with Senator Anderson's the vice chair of that committee. So we've been having some, and I think, well, Senator Reynolds is a great example, I think, of somebody who I truly believe has the right desired outcome.
Yeah.
And I think she's trying to weigh through how to get to her desired outcomes. Because at the end of the day, in my mind, supporting pregnant mothers, young mothers, I couldn't think of a better group of people that I really want to support. A child, they say, I think she's probably the one that said this to me in a meeting, is that in that first year of a baby's, life,
Development.
sets up almost everything for the rest of their
That's
life.
right.
But
Yeah.
but everything, like, what are the parents doing? Like, where are they? What housing? And I never really thought about it that way. And she's right. But I always go, being a Republican, like, what is our role? And then what is the role of the parent and the grandparents and the cousins and the uncles and the aunts and the community, the local community, and making sure that that stuff happens versus the state. And I
Yeah,
think,
and it's a great question to ask. And I would tell you, as somebody who fell out of family, not by choice, uh, we have a broken familial society. I believe that the government broke families at one point, either when I was little or before I was born, by not investing in trying to keep families together and encouraging them to find a way to be together. I don't know if it was like the separation of church and state type of a thing, but at some point in my lifetime, the void in really investing in families are hard and super important to success and stabilization is real. Navigating my own life, because my mom had her issues. My sister and I really had a really interesting upbringing, moved a lot, in and out of different communities, introduced to a lot of different people. And, when my mom wasn't able to parent, my mom's mom was around to take care of us, some, but it wasn't like we could just call up grandma and she'd come get us no matter what. Like it had to be like a real deal. We have a lot of people who are, like I said, have fallen out of family. And the further you get away from the people that love you, even if you're difficult, the further lost you get into the ether of darkness and you're by yourself. And
yeah,
being lonely is really dangerous. What I would like to see is kind of the reinstitution of, boy, people are difficult. And if a member of your family is experiencing something that's difficult and you don't know how to navigate that, lean in to me. And I have a system that can help you find a path forward together. Whether it's an education on somebody you're related to that has bipolar disorder or is a drug addict or, whatever. Education and information is power. And I think that people are scared of admitting that they don't like being uncomfortable and around people who struggle with whatever challenge they're struggling with. And so it's easier just to avoid them. And then they get separated from family and they get lost out into the world. And then there's nobody. Then they have nobody. And then they get lost into the bad spaces of people who want to take advantage of them. And that is festering all around us. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people who are experiencing homeless today, literally go out into the parks and talk to people and try to bring them out of the park into services. And often what I hear from them is they don't want to come into services because those are their family. That's their people. And if they leave their people, then they're alone. And they're in an apartment alone. And then who do they have? And
yeah.
I'll tell you, being alone is awful. I've experienced being alone, and I don't think anybody should have to live life that way. It's not the government's job to fix everything, but it is our job to take care of people when they don't have anywhere else to go. And I don't mean like take care of them as like pay for their world. I think it's our responsibility to love them up and provide connection and systems of care to help them stabilize and find a community and navigate that. And we can do that through behavioral health services if we really focus on it.
Hmm.
Sometimes that takes a few months, sometimes it takes a few years. My mom was a patient of the Marion County behavioral health system for 20 years. And then she moved to Polk County and she transferred her services out. That's almost my entire life. And I mean, it was when I became a commissioner, I literally called our director of behavioral health and was like, why? Why was she a client of yours for so long? And he was like, well, that's interesting. I should look into that. And then we did an entire audit here in Marion County on our behavioral health program and realized that we had people like on our roster for a decade or more, a couple decades, but they weren't seeking services, but we weren't making access or room for anybody else because we had people filling up our system.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's not okay. We need to make room.
I,
But
I,
we needed to make room because we had room for people to come along.
yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that there's, I look at like we used to call it the unemployment department because I thought that was a better word for it anyways. Um, but there's a percentage of unemployment that is, they say, normal within a society, right? I mean, you're going to have, they used to
Sure.
say full employment was like 3 or 4%, right? That was
Mhm.
unemployed at the time. And because people go through transitions, right? They're going through, issues with things, they get fired, whatever the case may be. And then there was this like, okay, what's the point of time that is it 6 months that you help somebody? Some states have 1 year, depending on the state. And I kind of believe that with behavioral health, like there's a certain percent of society that is going to struggle. And I
Yeah.
don't think we've determined what's maybe an acceptable rate of that percentage of our population that is going to struggle with it or needs help. I think we all struggle with it.
Yeah.
There's what percentage needs help from government services or government pay on any level, whether it's an NGO or anybody. Like, so there's a percentage of that. And then we have to say the next question is how long?
Yeah.
Like, should they be a 20-year, service? Like, hey, listen, you kind of been on the dole for 2 years now. It's kind of like, time to step up and get a job and go make life happen.
Yeah.
And because you can't be here forever. And I don't, and maybe we're just so early in this conversation with mental health and behavioral health and all the things that we haven't really gotten to that point of asking, or maybe people aren't asking the right questions. And I don't know.
I don't think it's like there's one question to ask. Like in my perspective, in my own experience, like with my mom, she worked when she could work. And when she couldn't work, she didn't. The system of government, so like in counties, we support the Medicaid population. Like if you're on the Oregon Health Plan, we're required to provide access to you if you have a need that fits within our space. Counties, the government, OHA, they don't provide services to commercially insured people. We only provide services to people who are in poverty. And getting out of poverty is really hard. In fact, we don't really have a system in Oregon designed to help people scale up and out of poverty. There's no roadmap to it. I've been living through it my whole life and working hard to figure out how to not go into poverty. And that's a daily learning thing because I didn't grow up in a home that was stable. I didn't have parents that taught me about finances and things like that. I think that for folks like my mom, is she stabilized? She, lived her life, and when she was unstable, she needed some help. Same for everybody, like I'm not ashamed to say that I had to go to counseling, 10 years ago to deal with my emotions to try to figure out like why I was feeling the way I was feeling. I think it's okay to check in with people, and share your feelings and get some, education. I don't know, communication going to work through your problems. I think where we go wrong though is when we label people and we tell them, you really need this help. Like you really need me to be successful. Instead of saying, I'm here when you need me. You let me know and I will be responsive to you
Yeah.
versus enabling people to be stuck in the system like they're incapable of being stable. And stable is in flux for every human. I don't care if you have a mental diagnosis or not. Living is hard and every day it can change for some people. Sometimes it's every few years. I think it's okay to like have a space to engage. But I also know that there's this grander scale. And I believe the population once was small and I think it's now greater, but I think we can work our way out of it.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of our forensic doctors here in Marion County recently who oversees a lot of our psychological forensic evaluations for people who need treatment for psychiatric challenges. We have a lot of drug-induced psychosis going on in Oregon, a lot of it in Salem. He was educating me on the fact that when people enter into drug-induced psychosis, depending on the length of time they've been in that drug-induced space, they likely can work their way out of it through recovery and through certain like medicated supports. Their brain can recover. Whether they go back to being exactly who they were before is to be determined, but they can go back to some level of normalcy and be able to function. But it takes a concerted effort, a system of care to really immerse them into that requires real medical treatment for them to get out of it. And we're not, as a state, looking at that as a real serious option. Like, we're not even having the conversation. In fact, the state hospitals like actively trying to prevent people from going into it. And they don't provide dual diagnosis treatment. The state hospital only statutorily is required to provide mental health treatment. So what happens when you have a mental health disorder and a drug uh, issue together and you get committed to the hospital? Well, they're only focusing on what they're required to focus on, which is your mental health. But what about the substance use? Like, what if you're actively using? Shouldn't we address that too? And because we're not looking at these multi-system approaches, we're not treating the whole person. And so it's going to take us a long time to get out of it because we're not being as creative as we could be.
Gosh, you sound like a Democrat. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Look at us, two Republicans talking about mental health and behavioral health.
I
I'm
think
going to
it's
go
important.
yes, it is. It's super important, and obviously, it's probably the number one issue in Oregon. Because everybody knows somebody, and I think
Yeah.
but it's great to hear your perspective as a commissioner who's on the front lines, who fights at the local, national, state level for money, obviously, to come down and just to try to help that guy you see in the park, right? That's homeless, and because you obviously have compassion because you walk past that person and you want to help them. I think we all. That's why I
Yeah.
think we all care about it, because I think
Yeah.
we inherently, you know, wonder what's that person's story, like why are they
Yeah.
there homeless? Wondering. There was a guy, we were leaving DC on Tuesday, and I taking my Lyft driver from Africa, I think somewhere. I was asking him where he's
Huh.
from. He's a migrant, and we're stopped at the stoplight. We haven't quite left DC yet, and there was this guy that was clearly strung out on drugs, like literally walking through traffic, asking for
Yikes.
money, and he was probably 30, maybe. And my Lyft driver goes, look at this guy, and this is my accent. Look at he could do anything. He lived born in the greatest country in the world, and of course he loves Donald Trump. My Lyft driver did, and
Yeah.
he goes, he needs a job. If he get the job, he has purpose. And he went off and he's like, that's what people lack. They lack purpose. My purpose was to get the hell out of my country and come to America, and because I could do what I want to do here, and I'm
Yeah.
happy. And it was kind of funny, and I just love talking to the guy, and I ended up giving the dude like a $30 tip on his, he was
Yeah.
like, this is the biggest tip I ever got. But it was so much fun to hear what he's got to say. And he's like looking at these homeless people, and he's pissed because that guy had everything and they're not doing anything. And then you
Yeah.
have probably the other Lyft driver that I didn't get into that probably sits there and says, "Oh," and gives that guy $3, and then they're going to go
Yeah.
buy fentanyl with it. You have this crazy two sides of this issue that is just so intense, and I don't know the answer to it. I think it comes down to access, education, and at the end of the day, people need to have a purpose. Like
Yeah.
you have a purpose every day when you get up and you go to your job as a county commissioner. I have a purpose. I know when my kids were born, the gravity of my purpose changed exponentially. My
Yeah.
anxiety went up exponentially. My, my need to make more money went up exponentially because now I got to figure out how to get them through college. And,
Yes.
we all go through that. That's that shared experience. And I think that this is what Democrats and Republicans have that unifies us.
Yeah.
Like I always say, like the problems unify us, the solutions divide us.
Yes. That's right.
And I think we have to focus on trying to get the solutions, not to divide us. And it's hard when we're the super minority, as you said. Rob
Mhm.
just wants to throw more money at it. And we kind of say, well, we need a little bit more personal responsibility, because I think most people are willing to
That's
put
right.
money towards this problem.
I am. It's interesting that you said personal responsibility because everyone talks about accountability, and accountability uh insinuates that I'm going to do something to them or for them. But really what we're talking about is personal responsibility. And you're totally right. Like everybody has to own their own space. They have to own their own responsibility of what they're doing and
Yeah.
where they're going. And when you are so incapacitated and can't make any choices other than to stay in that incapacitated space. And I don't know if that's a choice for everybody. I mean, I have literally physically with my own eyes watched drug dealers put fentanyl in people's hands and help them put it in their mouth in Salem, in East Salem. Like I've watched it. So I mean, I don't know what to do with that information, but like not
Put them in
everybody's
jail
making
for
the
20
conscious
years.
choice.
Like that person should go to prison. Like hard.
Well, I agree. Our district attorney in Marion County has a tagline right now when 4002 passed, dealers get prison, users get treatment. And they're delivering on that as best they can because we,
Page, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, District Attorney Paige Clarkson. Yeah, she's pretty great. You know, if I believe with her deeply that if there are people in my area, wherever my area is, it might be where I'm standing today, that want to harm someone else, I'm going to launch myself into that in the middle of it to protect that person because I don't believe in preying on vulnerable people. And I was a vulnerable person growing up. So I've experienced predators and you know, just through society, just through growing up. I'm not a victim to the way my life was. In fact, it provided me a lot of wisdom. I think it's an opportunity to be able to look at the world from a different lens and say, we might need to separate these populations and really provide access and persistence to personal responsibility and also guide folks who are incapacitated into a safer environment to solve these problems. And they're monumental. I don't have the solution for all of it, but boy, I tell you what, I show up every single day and work towards ultimately solutions.
Yeah, no,
So
I hear you. Well, I think it's been very fun to have you on. Let me look at us. I think we're like an hour and a half in.
I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's great. It was a great conversation. I love having you as a co-host. You know, I think and Reagan would love this because he's way into he was involved because Senator Knopp was on that
Right.
doing committee and he was really engaged in it and would tell me what I needed to know. So I love hearing your perspective from a county commissioner level. I think it's really important that our legislature listens to our counties and our cities, except for Multnomah and Portland, and really try to understand how, because I think we're all supposed to support each other as we go down to the local level. So,
Right.
and sometimes things are better done at the state level than they are at the local
Sure.
level. And some things are better done at the local level, the state level. So let's have more
It
of these
should be a
conversations.
flexible partnership.
Yeah, you're gonna have to be our commissioner special host. So
I would love, I mean, I really enjoy it. And I'll tell you too, while I don't agree with everything that happens in Multnomah County, uh, and I would never want to live there, I appreciate some of the effort that's really being put out to try to be problem solvers. I know the community's pretty frustrated up there, but I think what's important for people to know, because I had to learn this the hard way, is it takes so long for anything in government to get done. I was I mean, I'm not new to government. Like coming into the commissioner seat, it wasn't like I hadn't been exposed to it
yeah,
before because I'd been around it for about 20 years before. But I tell you what, I get frustrated literally every day with the pace of how things are. And I know the reason is for protection and transparency and accountability of the systems. But by God, like when we're talking about a crisis, like when the governor signed the executive order, like you, I had some hope. I was pretty excited.
yeah.
And
Well,
it just got diluted. So here we are.
and we see Trump signing these executive orders, and all of a sudden, you had every federal worker had to go back to work, and then they're all just crying foul, and they're just. But he's like, "Yeah, no, sorry, come to work or bye." You know, and
Yeah,
I think the governor has a lot more power in her pen. You and I lived through Governor Brown, who lived and died by
that's true.
executive order, and
Yep.
I don't think the governor, you know, to be. I think you were right when you said Governor Kotek was a legislator and she came up through that space, and being a governor and being a governor is different than being the speaker of the house. And so
Oh,
I
yeah.
think she gives way too much to the legislature and
I agree.
realizes that we're separate branches of government. And I think the legislature also gives the governor too much leeway in her budget and stuff. I think we need to be more critical with the GRB and all that sort of stuff and
Yeah.
really, you know, hammer down on some of that stuff. This is what I tell Senator Lieber when I see her. But um,
sure she appreciates that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She loves me. Actually, she's one of my favorite people. I think I call her my.
She's a lovely human being. I imagine she does love you because she
Yes.
loves to give people shit and she likes to get it back. And she's,
Yes.
like I said, I think her heart's in the right place. I think she just
Yep.
doesn't have
I
all
agree.
the exposure, and
I
I hope
agree.
that comes to her.
I think the
Yeah,
governor has the wrong people around her in her agencies that are trying to keep their job versus solve problems. And I
yeah,
think that if I was governor for a day, all I would need was a day. Because I
noted.
don't think yeah, well, one, I wouldn't make it the day two, but but I think you could solve a lot of problems. I think more problems than she's letting on that she can with the executive, because
Yeah.
we all lived through COVID and saw what Governor Brown did with us with the executive order. Um, I think there's more that can be done there, and more to
I
come.
agree with you, which is exactly why I said that she has to want to take the risk, and she
Yeah,
has not proven to be wanting to take any risks.
yeah, yeah.
You can spend someone else's money all day and sleep well at night, I guess, if you're that kind of person. But to really show up and be a problem solver requires risk, and that requires, I think, some vulnerability to enter into the space and be like, shit, I
Sure.
don't know everything, but I do have a perspective and I'm willing to throw it out there and see
That's
if we
good.
can make something out of this. And people want to follow that kind of a leader. And like, it's by time that Oregon gets somebody that can show up and be like, you tell me what you think is right, and I'm going to challenge you on it. Let's go get the work done.
Good.
Like, I'm ready. I'm so ready.
Yeah, good. I love it. I can't wait for more. I know we didn't even go into education. Like you, I mean, I love it talking about education. And you were on the school board and fought against the woke mob and,
Yeah.
that's in there. And like, we'll have to cover that one next time too, because I think
Okay.
education, and then we'll bring on Representative McIntyre, who I love talking education with her and she can talk about some of the stuff that's happening with the education, because they're asking for a 14 billion. Like, it's just
I
crazy.
know it.
So yeah, we'll do this
Wow.
again. But let's
Okay.
today. Where can people find you? What is your social media that you like to use? Are you more an X person? Do you do nothing? Email
Yeah,
address?
so I have an Instagram, and then I have Facebook. I have an X, but I'm learning how to use it because I think it's a dangerous place to enter into. Like, throwing out 120 characters of your thoughts might be dangerous for someone like me. So I'm gently wading through it.
You can see the
But I
crap
have a
I do.
Facebook page that I'm pretty active on,
Oh,
and
good.
Instagram.
Yeah. All right.
And then they can
I'm
find
sure
my
they can just
website and
search
send me
you,
emails.
search Danielle Bethell, and they'll find you, I would imagine. So, and DanielleBethell.com, I think, has your links on
That's
there.
right. Yep.
Go there, follow her, listen what's going on in Marion County. If you want to follow me on X and hear my crazy thoughts on public transportation, which is what I rail against. I hate public transportation. Uh,
Good
at
to know.
briangiverson.com, and make sure you use crosstabs.fm. More to come. Thank you again.